28. That is the number of times Dargan Ware attempted to buzz in during last night's game of Jeopardy, only to get beaten to the buzzer by his opponents. This is, honestly, a bit unprecedented. In fact, it got so bad towards the end of the single Jeopardy round that you could actually see Dargan starting to get a bit frustrated, which I really can't blame him for, because single Jeopardy was particularly brutal. There were a total of 16 answers that Dargan attempted to buzz in for, but wasn't quick enough in doing so. And keep in mind, there are 6 categories with 5 answers during the single and the double Jeopardy rounds, meaning that he missed out on the chance to solve over half of the total answers on the single Jeopardy board. I think the worst of it came near the end of the round though, because twice in a row, Dargan got beaten out by both of his opponents on a single answer. And what I mean is that, on this question about Monsters University, Dargan was first beaten out by Tom, who only said Monsters U, and thus was considered to be incorrect. But then, Elise also managed to buzz in before Dargan, and when this happened to him again on the very next answer, that's when Dargan finally showed a bit of frustration, or at least confusion, as to what exactly could be going wrong for him. That has to be one of the most brutal starts to a game of Jeopardy that I've ever witnessed. And I really thought that going into the double Jeopardy round, Dargan had basically zero chance of catching up to Tom. Especially once Ken Jennings mentioned the fact that his score of 15,600 was actually the highest amount that anyone has had while going into double Jeopardy during the entire season. And during the second half of the game, things would only continue being rough for Dargan. At least this time he was only beaten to the punch on 10 answers, but you could literally start to hear how loudly he was pressing the buzzer on each question, which I have to assume was all he could think to do at this point, after having to watch so many potential answers slip away.
Bush gave it to a zoo. Dargan.
What is a Komodo dragon?
That's right.
However, something pretty insane was about to happen, which would turn this entire game on its head. But real quickly, I just want to ask that, if you're enjoying this video, could you give it a like and subscribe to the channel? I'm really trying to get to 100 subscribers before the new year. Things were really starting to look bleak for Dargan Ware, as he continued struggling to buzz in before his opponents. But then, something of a miracle occurred, as he was able to find the first daily double, ironically in the category Get Rich or Die Trying, and Dargan was up to the task, as he immediately called for a true daily double, meaning he was betting his entire sum of 8,600. And you can see the moment on his face where Dargan knew that he had this answer in the bag, which brought his total up to 17,200, putting Dargan right back into the running of this game. And here is the miracle part, because the very next answer he chose had the other daily double, which Dargan successfully wagered 9,000. Allowing him to essentially undo all the damage that had been done by his struggle to get down the timing with his buzzer. And things got even better for him, as Tom would get a couple of answers incorrect, along with the fact that neither of his opponents were buzzing in very much. This gave Dargan the chance to expand upon his lead, but as we neared the end of Double Jeopardy, you could once again see his struggles coming back into play. To be fair though, it actually wouldn't end up mattering too much at this point in the game, because Dargan still maintained enough of a lead to go into Final Jeopardy with a bit more money than Tom after it was all said and done. All things considered, despite Dargan getting beaten to the buzzer 28 times across 26 questions, this was still a really amazing game of Jeopardy. It's not that common to see 2 contestants going into Final Jeopardy with over $25,000 apiece, especially not in the fashion that Dargan pulled it off, bringing the game from looking nearly hopeless to ending up with a lead. However, the Final Jeopardy answers weren't particularly kind to anyone in this game, as nobody was able to get all 3 of the correct area codes from when they were first introduced. But in all fairness to Dargan, he actually got the closest of anyone to being correct. First we had Elise's answer revealed, and this is in no way meant to be offensive to her, but I'm sure she had to feel like a bit of a spectator at times during this game, with how much Dargan, and especially Tom, managed to dominate the majority of the boards. But regardless, she simply thanked Jeopardy for having her on the show, which was a cool way to go out. And as for Tom, he ended up getting only 1 of the 3 area codes correct. However, he was tactful enough not to risk that much money, which left it all up to Dargan, who actually managed to get 2 of the 3 correct area codes in his response. But unfortunately for him, the wager was far larger than Tom's had been, which meant that Dargan Ware would go out as a 2-day champion. But I genuinely believe that if he could have figured out how to time the buzzer correctly, and even managed to secure just half of the 26 answers he missed out on, Dargan would still be on the show. But in all fairness, Tom quite clearly is a very strong player, who can also time the buzzer very well on top of it, and that gets me wondering how long he can last for as well. Maybe I'll be back here in a couple weeks to discuss Tom as the show's newest super champ. But until next time, this has been another Angry Snail production.